We're Parsis.
Yeah, I know Parsi. My friend's a Parsi. His name is Imran. Yeah. You know, Ratan Tata is coming to school. Yeah, he's already been there once. He's coming back in June. We're giving him an honorary degree. I've met him personally.
What's he like?
Oh, very quiet, very. You know, my good friend knows him, and he lives in an apartment. He doesn't have a driver. He's very, very unassuming. But unfortunately, the Parsi population is really shrinking.
Well, that's because we're also very stubborn.
I know.
About certain things.
Yeah, well, you know, ideology will drive people into ruin if they stick to it. But no, my friend who is a Parsi, no, I'm sorry, his wife is Parsi and he's a Muslim. Because her family said, okay, how many wives is he going to have? And Imran is not that way. And my other friend is Rantu Basu, and he's, you know, obviously the names give you away, and he's listening to all. They're both actually born in Calcutta, which is really strange. But yeah, I meet a lot of people. You know, it takes you a while to kind of understand the culture. One of the dilemmas we have with the Indian students is, I mean, obviously people are getting, you know, for the appeal. It's it's just their expectation. It's like they expect when they graduate that we will get them a job. Well, in North America, we'll help you get a job. But, you know, you're not in, it's entitlement. And they complain about small things, you know, it's like, well, the internet didn't work too well, are you going to discount our tuition? So, no, we're not. So, because there is a school we're in Hyderabad, there's a school called ISB, and so, you know, again, I've asked why people go to ISB, it's visiting profs from the US now, they're paying for 11 months. But it's like, well, I don't want that much. The courses aren't that good. They're all quantitative, but it's getting a job. It's just so they're not exactly, I mean, there are the entrepreneurs, and the family businesses are fantastic.
You should definitely check out. His name is Sorum.
Would you email me? Okay, that's great.
But so I got into bed, like changed. Then you eat some hard after you're in bed. So I'm my friend Sam, who was and he was texting me, goes, what? And he was like, it was like crazy Friday night, huh? He's like, oh, you're on talk.
Elizabeth.
Yes.
Come on down.
Well, you can be in the city
Like
and
the
off
Price
the
is
grid.
Right. Come on down.
Already.
What's that?
The camera's on, by the way.
I just
Camera's
need to
on?
watch
Yep.
before we go.
All right.
Watch it on time.
But he was like,
Yeah.
I said, you don't know you.
Isaac, all right. Our numbers swell.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
Obviously next.
Yeah, the traffic.
We should have just picked the clock.
Yep.
I was thinking, what was it now?
I don't know how to.
Oh, no.
Well, you know, this is Margaret's school.
His desk is not big enough for anything,
We-
just big
We
enough.
use Mary Lou to send out alumni
Coming from
and students. Yeah, and board members, but I think Margot has a better group, better list.
Well, they recognize the name. I mean, we have to also, the Margot Rome name.
Yeah. At the Rome building, another Rome building here.
Why? People recognize that.
Yeah. You all know that our plan here is to have a workshop so that we can then take this workshop into a 2-credit course next spring. A graduate level course as part of the MSRI curriculum. So, what I need your help with is thinking, what belongs in the course? What should the course include? You know, this idea of sustainable cities is a pretty fuzzy thing. You know, what is it? like, what is sustainability all about? You know, and everybody knows, we all think something different, and I've always thought that the green building is one thing, but the real issues for sustainability are not inside the green building. And you all have seen the real estate development process. Mayor, did you see this? Yes. Okay. All right. And and there's 7 steps in the building development. There's just one step, right? And it's in the middle, and it's the easiest one, quite frankly. But when you go from redevelopment down here at the bottom, zip back to the top, you go back into the land packaging. And the land packaging stage is what we're talking about yesterday with the competitions they had. I think most of the important sustainable decisions are made in the land packaging stage. When you put the deal together, you put the plan together, and that's when really we have the biggest effect on sustainable development, I think. So that sets the stage then to the land developers. The land developers, they want to know what they have to do. You tell me what we have to do, and they can do it. And that means drilling down 5,000 feet to get water for your heating system. You drill down 5,000 feet. So, or if it means having all the a carbon neutral site, they can do that. Well, I think, but that's all set up when the plan goes together in the land packaging process. And the hard part is you don't find this in any textbooks, but it's the most critical part. So, and when you're talking about sustainable development, how do you teach it? How, in infrastructure development, infrastructure development is the same kind of theme, but you overlay sustainability on top of infrastructure, then you got some pretty tough questions, because of all the different choices. So, with our small group today, this is good, because one of our concerns was we want to try out this material, so to speak, with a smaller group, to see what people are interested in, how it goes together, and then next year then we have a classroom, and making it open to the public. We're not sure how to. We want to get our act together, so to speak. So this is a dress rehearsal for next year, but this is more. This is kind of like reading the play ahead of time to see how the play works, and so that's our plan. And we have a morning session, and an afternoon session. Saturday afternoon, we don't have to go to 4 o'clock. I think everybody's getting tired, and I appreciate you. I get tired on Fridays. By Friday night, I'm tired. I've had a big week. It's never a Saturday morning, and I'm really tired. But I get to sit down, Jim, and turn over to you, James McCullough, professor of infrastructure.
So now it's a conversation. It's not a class, so feel free to chime in. I should give you a little background. I teach this over, we have a 12-week period, and there's 3 hours class, and so I have 36 hours of teaching, so there's a lot of assignments. A lot of them are of a research nature. It's not an easy course to get visiting lecturers to come in. There might be a few consultants in building science, but my real estate course I teach in the fall, I can almost get a visitor every week. But in this subject, it's really difficult. And so there's a lot, the assignments are more of a research nature, where I guess I could politely say I use the students to sort of find new information for me. And so this presentation is a little, it's packaged in a way that is a bit maybe too comprehensive, but I thought it was important to go through the whole subject in a way to get an overview, because that was really the purpose of doing this. So if there's a lot of material and it doesn't quite hang together and so forth, it's simply that I tried to take a 36-week course and boil it down to, 10 or 12 hours and leave you with an impression of the course and where you want to go with it. So there are practical limitations on that. Yesterday was kind of the big picture, and today is kind of the little picture. I'm a believer, first of all, based on the big picture, I'm still optimistic, but it's the small things that are going to make a difference. And that's where my optimism really goes up, because I see this capacity. If I have any complaint about being in a business school, it's that it's not exactly flooded with entrepreneurs. I don't think there's enough entrepreneurs. And even in our real estate program, not that many students over my years have owned their own firm today. And yet anyone in the business will say it's a very entrepreneurial business. Right? So the small things you'll see today really are entrepreneurial. So that's why I think it's great to have it in a business school and make that connection to what is happening with these very small things. So that's just this background. There was a slide I left out yesterday, and I by accident, I went back to get it. I mentioned this new book that just came out called The Resource Revolution, and it's only out like a week. But this diagram came out of it, and it's kind of fascinating because if we took a lot of elements in our society and examined them, they may not look that different. And basically what it's telling us is that in the automobile, I know it's hard to read, but if you see the yellow, there's the engine losses. If you see the yellow, that's the actual amount of fuel that's used to move the car. And the total, if you actually look at it, 86% of fuel never reaches the wheels in a car. Because the motor itself is very inefficient, plus the friction and everything else about it. And also, the typical American car spends about 96% of its time parked. And even when you look at the roads, the American road reaches peak throughput only about 5% of the time. And even then, it's only 10% covered with cars. So you can see that our whole system has tremendous room for improvement. And if you've ever seen the thing about Google and their driverless car, I mean, right there, they increase capacity by about 15%. By pulling them close together. But you can see how inefficient the internal combustion engine is. So you see inertia, aerodynamics, and then there's rolling resistance, et cetera, but it's, the car is quite a flagrant misuse of energy. So there's obviously a lot of work we can do. So I wanted to, I didn't show it yesterday, and I didn't want to go over that because it's an example out of their book on just where the opportunities are. I'll skip ahead. It was early on, so it won't take me a second to go back. I think we kind of ended up in Edmonton. If we look at, we ended up talking a bit about Edmonton and some of the challenges there. And if you look at the urban, sort of key urban trends, sort of this increasing need to conserve land resources. It's coming from a lot of directions. But certainly as cities grow, they've actually they have in the past few decades consumed more land per person, not less. And so that's becoming an increasing concern. The threat of climate change to cities. You know, cities like I mentioned yesterday, the city of Calgary would have never dreamt that the downtown would have 15 feet of water. It was just not. I mean, you're in a climate that is basically very almost semi-arid in a way because they're on the leeward side of mountains. Now, whether it was climate change or whatever it was, and this has occurred in a number of U.S. cities, severe flooding, etc. So we are discovering that urban areas now are very, very affected by these weather changes. We're seeing a rise in energy. Our natural gas price went up last week 40%. And I noticed on my shares that they jumped. So, but I don't know why, but we have a regulatory agency and they gave them the right to increase the natural gas prices. Then we have the challenges of just what it is in terms of sustainable economic growth. I mean, developers build the city block by block, building by building, and the question is when you put them together, what does this mean in terms of sustainability, other than a green roof and a few other bells and whistles that they'll add to it. In fairness, we have a very vibrant condo development. We build about 15,000 a year downtown. And the developers, in fairness to them, are really responding to market pressures, and that is people, if you're going to buy a 350 square foot condo at $600 a foot, a parking stall is 400 square feet. So it doesn't make sense to buy a 350 square foot condo and a 400 square foot parking stall. The parking stall is $65,000 now to $75,000. They have to charge for it. So people are saying, just a minute, like I'm buying 350 square feet, that's all I can afford. Do I really need a car? So we find more and more of them doing away with cars and putting in car share space. And so, you know, the economics is beginning to take. The other thing that we find that I think is very good is that the other thing that buyers are very sensitive to are the condo fees. Now they run around 70 cents a square foot when you buy, but lo and behold, a year later they've gone up. So what the developers are doing is giving you more control over your costs by trying to make the unit as self-contained as possible. So rather than have central systems, you can control your own heat, your own air conditioning, et cetera, et cetera. A third thing they're doing now is really looking at different appliances that are much smaller. I mean, the 350 to 400 square feet, you don't put in that whopping big stove and fridge and washer dryer from Sears. You're now looking through the magazines to see what they have in Sweden and Italy and so forth. And so, you know, if you look at some of the fast-growing brands, I don't know if it's the same here, but Miele, for example, or Bosch. So the Germans have been very good at moving in this territory. So, you know, I think that the market is changing. And then finally, we've got declining populations in certain areas, but more importantly, we have aging and we have smaller households. The predominant household in most urban, well, certainly in most Canadian cities, is not families. It's what we call non-family households, probably 60%. So that means, you know, and there's a lot of factors contribute to that. You know, our divorce rate, which is very similar, is about 50%. So you know that that household is going to divide, or one out of every two households at some point is going to divide. And then you could assume that probably when it divides, there's at least one child involved, etc. So the demand for different kinds of living arrangements is quite strong. And of course, when you divide a household into two, you know, then you run into financial constraints and you have to make some severe trade-offs. And so walkability, access to schools, whether I own a car or not, become important. So this shows you there is an increasing demand for smaller houses. The house we used to build back in the days of Levittown was 940 square feet. I think the average, the last time I looked, the average new house size in the US was about close to 2,000. Now, but the demand is going down, and I've just highlighted the United States, and so you can see in almost every case from 1980 to 2008, we've actually seen a drop in house size. Not a lot, but again, it's the trend, and I'm sure if you looked at the Scandinavia or some of the European countries, it would be even much more significant. So we are seeing a much more demand. And one of the things I'm finding is that a lot of these small units are very badly designed because they're so used to building sort of an 850 square foot 2-bedroom, and they try and shrink it all down. And they haven't really done a very good job of that. So I think there's a huge opportunity for designing smaller units. And I suspect it'll begin to bring in some modularization in the industry also. Again, just one-person households. Oh, my arrow is over the wrong, oh, it's over Canada. So we've gone up, US has gone up, again, so you see these trends. And they're part of the sustainability issue. Because you know, it is requiring a different form of accommodation. And behind this also is a very important consideration. Developers are startled, and even the media, and they never pick it up because they don't understand what I'm saying. But when I tell people that it's, you know, housing, they use the term housing affordability. In economic terms, I tell them housing is a consumption good. It's a service cost. It's not about whether you own or rent. So for every dollar, according to our own statistics, for every dollar you spend consuming housing, you spend about 68 cents on the car. So the logical thing on affordability would be lower the cost of transportation and give people more discretionary income. So I did a study of all the Canadian and US cities using that formula. And if you want to see it, you can go to ULI under Twilliger, and they've got the model, and you just plug in your numbers. And what I discovered is the cities with the best public transit, the highest housing costs. And so, you know, it's if you can reduce that cost, it allows people to consume more housing. Whereas the argument about affordable housing is somehow, how do we produce it cheaper? You can't produce it cheaper. It's a cost of consumption. So it's a whole debate that gets carried by average house price. So if we can reduce the distance of work to home, then, and that's the formula. It's really how much does it cost you to work, to consume housing services, and how much does it cost to get to and from work and shopping, and combine those two, and it gives you some idea. And that's roughly, if I look at your census data, it's about 52%. Been constant over the years. The only problem is that the housing part's constant, the transportation part's been going up because of insurance and other factors. So, so I mean, I think sustainability is a broader debate upon on some of these issues, and we are finding that a lot of young people want to be downtown because that's where the good jobs are. We did a survey in Toronto, and downtown workers were paid about 25% better than suburban. Now you have to scrape them and find out why. They're better educated, the good jobs in the financial sector, consulting, etc. our downtown. So downtowns are actually, and I'm sure it's occurring in the US also, but they are really regaining. 25 years ago, 1 out of every 10 new jobs in our city went, 9 out of 10 went to the suburbs. Now it's 9 out of 10 go into the inner city. And that's a big shift. Our suburban office market is dead. Our suburban housing market is flat. Downtown, we've had 15 years of constant house price increases in the inner city. Why? Well, they don't make them anymore. You can, sorry.
I was just curious, where do your poor people live? I mean, we have a tendency to keep them in, the urban ghetto. And,
We don't have urban ghettos. Our problem is the reverse.
Yeah.
We have
So it's more
suburban ghettos.
European, like, where the poor would live out in the suburbs, or?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we certainly, homeless people go downtown. But we have a very large immigrant population. We average about 100,000 a year that are coming in, and these are people that go to the suburbs. And they go there because we have an Iranian community, a Korean community, a Chinese. So, and that's where they're discovering that there's real suffering. There's high rates of drugs, there's high rates of crime. And unfortunately, these are the people that need a car, because many of them are service workers and they can't afford a good car. So they're driving the clunkers that are, burning through the fuel and et cetera. And for them, transit is really not a very good option because they're working at some restaurant or, et cetera, or a hospital is a good example. So our problem is the reverse. And it's taken a long time. Suburbs don't want to admit this, but I more and more, they're seeing it from economic, they're just, I'm getting calls from small towns saying, what do we do to capture jobs, or suburban centers? What do we do to get better retail? And I said, well, the quicker you make yourself look like a vibrant city. Oh, but we don't want that, that's, the people came here to own a big house and a big lot. I said, we can't have both. So these smaller settlements are really now, they're awakening to this problem.
Have you seen the show Mad Men?
I know, I'm not addicted to it.
Okay, so it's given sort of an interesting story of, people moving into the from the city into the suburbs. I'm just wondering, and then, the Martin Luther King riots happen.
Yeah.
Hopefully, and what if something happens in the city, what could go wrong?
In the city?
Right, so there's this movement to move into downtown, into urban.
Well, give me an example of what you mean.
What could be the next potential, like Martin Luther King riots?
We don't have a city, we don't have that problem.
What the US could?
Well, I can't speak about the US and, but the only riot we had was the G7. We had a G7 meeting with protesters, but our inner city our biggest problem right now is continued gentrification and the moving out of these people.
It's like, well, what's the biggest risk now that everybody's going into the urban environment?
Yeah.
That all of this could blow up in our face.
Yeah, certainly, I know Montreal, Vancouver, Toronto, Ottawa. It's different. Now, I've lived in the US, I've lived through the riots. I happen to be here in the riots of '68, working in Kitchener. I was working on a project for the redevelopment of Anacostia. And then I was in Philadelphia in the riots. And so I'm not, I was there during the Martin Luther King assassination, so I'm not insensitive to it. As I say, the biggest, we're a bit of an anomaly in that we have now about 1 million Indian population, we have about 1 million Chinese, we've got a very big Eritrean. We've got a lot of these cultures, and I think our problem more is helping them. What we do find is that the highly qualified immigrants are not getting employed. They're not being utilized well, and certainly their pay scale is below white people. So ours is a bit of a different issue that way. I don't think we have a racial problem, a divide that way. It's more this, we do have the divide between rich and poor, and we do have this continuing problem of how we help immigrants. You know, we're growing 1 million people every 10 years, all in immigration.
What about schools? Are your inner city schools
Terrible.
good?
No,
They're terrible?
Here's the problem. We have a school board, and they run the schools. And then we have a city administration, and they run the city. And the school board makes stupid decisions like, populations are mobile. So they're finding there's not a high demand for certain kind of old-fashioned elementary schools in the inner city. Sell them and use the money. Oh no, we may need them. So they've got, it's a big asset management issue. And so we've got this proliferation of good private schools. So our inner city is losing its school population by about 7%, and the private schools are growing at about 8%.
That's a US problem, is that, when young people will come to the city and then marry, and then when they have a kid, it's fine, but when the kid needs to go to school, they'll often move to the suburbs, because that's what the good school systems are. But it sounds like you're
Yeah. No, we have that all over, and so the solution is, private schools, good private schools, with uniform and the whole deal, But these school boards are terrible. I mean, they just will not wake up. We did have one good example where there was a decrepit inner city school. They went into joint venture with a developer, and he built them a new school and built 2 condo towers and a new athletic field. And everybody said, what a great deal, set a prototype. And the school board said, yeah, we did it once, but don't think we're gonna keep doing this. And everyone said, but why not? I mean, you partnership with a developer, you got everything, but we find that these sort of semi-autonomous boards isolate themselves, and they have agendas that don't necessarily align with other agendas. Education, I would agree with you, the biggest single factor in where you buy is access to good schools, either public or private. All our good private schools are in the inner city. We have none. Well, I should say none. We might have one in the suburbs versus, within my neighborhood, a very short transit ride, there's about 12. Some are quite old.
You have boarding schools or these days?
So some board. My daughter goes to school that goes from what we call junior kindergarten through
Yeah.
high school, and it has boarding in addition to day students. So some of them have boarding, not a lot. The ones that have boarding are the ones that have been around a long time,
Right.
100 years, with nice grounds and sort of Gothic-looking buildings and that sort of thing, and high tuition.
Naturally.
Yeah. And when I say high tuition, I mean, I would say people are paying between $24,000 and $30,000.
Well, that's cheap by US standards.
Hey?
That's cheap by US standards. That's Canadian dollars, yeah?
Yeah, but you earn in Canadian dollars, so it's all relative. But I mean, it's a very good point. I mean, I think this whole question of how we move from work to home and how we move from home to school is a very big key, because it goes back to what we talked about yesterday, social sustainability. The city has to work socially and economically. It's not enough to just.
In some sense, I think it's interesting to listen to this conversation because in the US in particular, that is about one of the top 5 drivers of inability of the US to compete anymore.
Yeah.
The schools are failing massively. Our students can't compete I mean, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Common Core debate in terms of even the curriculum. Many of the schools, they are running like 20–30%
I know.
of kids who can, and it's even worse in the suburbs, not even in the so people are still thinking that somehow the issue is inner city or suburbs.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going on. So, the reason why I pointed out is that social infrastructure is one of the components of any social overhead that can drive GDP. So it's an economic issue.
Yeah, I
it's not
totally
that-
agree.
So, and people are still thinking in terms of ratio and all those things.
Yeah, we've paid more attention to international rankings, and I mean, Korea is the hard one to beat. I mean, they've got 99% literacy rate, and some of the Scandinavian countries. But we're finding we're coming in around the top 5 in math now, and the governments have put a huge emphasis on science and math, and we have standardized testing, but not like your, every child left alone or everything.
Yeah, and in Korea, for instance, all of that is free. It's considered social infrastructure to, and that's part of the social overhead.
Yeah.
Before you start having the kinds of competitiveness, here it's viewed as something that's privatized.
Yeah,
If I can have my own, then forget about that. And then not knowing that the market.
And by the way, our teachers are very well paid. Our teachers at elementary are around 75,000 starting. Oh yeah, they're all well qualified. I have 2 daughters in Atlanta, and they're in Marietta. And I said, one of them was head of the parent teacher. I said, what are you paying an entry teacher? They said 28,000. I mean, I just,
You know what's happening in North Carolina? A lot of the magnet teachers now are leaving Emma's because the governor came here and got it.
Yeah.
The payment. So it's really, it's a crisis.
Yeah. No, our teachers are quite, we have problems in the public school. I'm diverting here, but we have union problems of being able to move teachers around and get rid of poor teachers, but it's not as bad as New York City. But anyway, no, and even at the university level, our universities are inner city, and they're all publicly funded. So we don't have a tiering. We have good universities, McGill, University of Toronto, etc. But they're all pretty good, you know what I mean? And some have then this, what we call a research component, like University of Toronto. I would agree, education.
The centrality of what we're saying is that I think, what I'm stressing is that social infrastructure is part of the foundations of creating a middle class economy.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're talking about health, we're talking about housing, we're talking about.
Well, it goes
talking
back
about
to
schools.
whenever I show charts,
Yes.
the Scandinavian countries are always leaders
Yes.
in sustainability
Yes.
in all dimensions, whether it's from bicycles to reading to math skills. Somehow they packaged it. And, I really look to them in awe. And when you go there, the quality of life is quite attractive. So you're correct. If you're looking at, we do have to find ways to shorten the distance. We have to find ways to have less automobile. I think in Toronto, 93% of all work trips are by car. Really terrible. And if you look at the average occupancy, it's probably 1.1. More district-wide energy, and the biggest problem we've had with this is the city opposing it. The city engineers won't let you put your pipes under their property. Because, and then the other issue is scalability. Optimal use of land, more efficient public service delivery, and better access to a diversity of local services and jobs. So at a city scale, these are things that are part of sustainability at a policy level. If you look at the land use itself, and I'm talking globally here, the growth is primarily going to be in the next few decades in Africa, Middle East, and South America. They've still got very high fertility rates. And we will see it slow down in China and Europe. There isn't enough population growth now to replenish, to offset. So Europe is actually shrinking in population. And Europeans have a real opposition to immigration. They'll die before they accept it. We've been actually very good on this. It's our lifeblood. I mean, what drives our society for immigrants, there's no question about it. I guess being a small country, it's a luxury. But if you look at, in the US, people 65 and older will make up 22% of the population in 50 years, up from 15% now. Now, 50 years is someone else's problem. But certainly aging is an area that we haven't dealt with. And then the other influence is just technology and design, more materials, material science, sensors, etc. So if you look at just the way we're going to use land, for example, in our planning system, and you probably have the same, developers have to set aside so much for parkland and school sites. And we're saying, but why don't they set aside land for transit corridors? Because to come back and use expropriation or eminent domain to get that land is expensive. Why not build it into the planning system? And what we find in a number of cities, they have planning regulations that require you to dedicate a school site, and there's a sign on the school site saying future school site. But the school boards have the money to build the school. And so we haven't, I mean, the planners live in one world, the transportation people live in another, and we haven't been able to even shift our planning regulations in this regard.
Jim, we had at Potomac Yards, we had to set aside ground for a transit way. We had to design a transit way, and we had to design the shelters for it as a developer. And this is all required by the planning, and they never did anything. So 12 years later, we have a strip of green running through the park, and right through the, it's a prime transit corridor, but it is a problem of the political will to do something like that. And at the same time, we set aside ground for a metro stop. It's a big sign that says future metro stop right here.
Yeah.
This is in Alexandria, and for the last 15 years they've been debating where to put the metro stop. Even though we have a place designed, we have the side lit up, and we designed a metro stop so we know how big it would be. And but when it comes to the political will of actually doing anything, they're still.
Well, in the old days, before my time, now what happened with cities is the public transit was built privately, and it was used to promote real estate. And so if you go to Philadelphia, you probably know the main line. I mean, the main line is still just a streetcar that goes out Radnor, etc. Go to Cleveland, go to many of these older cities, and you'll notice that there were these transit lines. Now, what happened was the car companies bought them and closed them all back around 1920s.
Automobile car.
Yeah, the automobile companies basically bought a lot of the private bus companies and transit and put them out of business.
LA was a big one.
Yeah, and so what happened was that they then became a public responsibility. Of course, the public had no money. But back in those days, literally, people would build. Developers would go in and with the city, and they would bring in a private operator. And you go into the, quote, streetcar cities, and you can see the vestiges of that kind of thing. And the mainline, Philadelphia, Boston, I mean, there's a very good regional transportation system.
Were they profitable? Because
Wow.
today, transit, everybody agrees it's not profitable at all. Maybe it's because it's a public good, or it's run by the public sector. But back in the day, that you were saying, the transit, was it run by the private sector? Was it profitable?
Well, I assume it was profitable, but it was also tied into the real estate play. So I'm sure that many of these were probably I'm not knowledgeable about it, but if they were private businesses, I assume they were reasonably profitable. Yeah.
back to the last slide. Is what you're saying is that these characteristics are what are required to promote sustainability, or you think?
Yeah, yeah.
And why do you think this will never happen in the US so far, given what's going on?
Why it would happen?
It wouldn't happen in the US.
It wouldn't?
Yes. Why?
Oh, I don't know if it, are you, it could happen, I assume it could happen.
No, I'm saying it might not. I mean, that's what I was thinking about it. I want to get your reaction. Why do you think? And maybe other people in the audience can comment.
Oh.
What is preventing the urbanization in
Oh.
the US from achieving these kinds of convergence?
Pricing.
Eh?
Pricing. I'll give you an issue, just automobile. I mean, you know, go to Europe, I'm paying $7 a liter for gasoline.
For instance, optimal use
That,
of...
you know, all of a sudden I'm sensitive to the use of the car. That's a small example, but I think our whole pricing mechanism is such
I don't
that,
think so. I mean, what about the example of Atlanta? You're familiar with Atlanta?
yeah,
And I think this last, when they had this weather event that
Yeah.
exposed the fact that a lot of the jurisdiction within Atlanta do not cooperate with the local government, the state
Yeah.
government, and so many others, that revealed the nature of the governance in that area, and how it was an embarrassment. Obviously, everybody saw it on TV. Okay, what I'm getting at is that the problems in the Atlanta, for instance, is an example of what I'm trying to emphasize, is that the land use practices in the metro area is the #1 problem for the kinds of quality of urban life you have,
Oh, I agree
and the
with
wastage of
that.
resources that we're talking about.
I mentioned to
And
someone.
that has to do not with pricing, it has a lot to do
With the land use, yeah.
with the land use that is driven by racial
Yeah,
segregation.
I mentioned yesterday to someone that Atlanta has got roughly the same population as Barcelona, but it has 5 times the land area. And it doesn't matter how you look at it, you can't make
You
public
can't make
transit
it
work.
work. You
It
can't
just-
make it work. And what is driving it
Yeah.
is racial segregation, and it's getting
Yeah.
worse.
Yeah,
Okay, so what I'm saying is that I think a lot of these things that we talk are economics and other things not. And
but
until-
you know, there are people, I mean, every city's different. You know, I go to San Francisco, Boston, so I don't wanna, I mean, some cities have bigger problems, and I don't wanna kind of spend a lot of time commiserating on them. One of the things that is important, that we don't give enough emphasis to, is just good design.
Jim, I think that, to go back to your point though, it's pricing. As you said, it's the land use allocations in these metropolitan areas inefficient. However, if you raised the price of gasoline to $6 a gallon, and just say across the board, as a federal law, raised to $6 a gallon, we would immediately start having land use reallocations.
Oh,
They would
yeah.
start working much closer together to say, how do we deal with this? And right now, it's not a constraint, and I think you can, bring in the
then I think, I mean, I don't want to turn into debate, but I think essentially markets, right? Markets in democratic societies are not divinely ordained. They are socially constructed and driven by the politics. So you can never, pricing reflect competitive markets that are working. But you know that a lot of, actually now, when we're dealing with urban, the Brookings have done a lot of studies about this, is that basic economic principles are not allowed to govern how we allocate and price our resources. And so if you come at it, you need to recognize what it is that is preventing the inefficient patterns to move against what we know, as you said, as sustainable trends that will make urban living. Okay?
But the problem is, it's like, the more you unravel this, the more courses, you get one political science and one in urban economics, and so you can see, so it's always hard to kind of say, okay, what can we do in our little sphere? And what I've done is rather than expand it, I've tried to kind of begin to focus and looking at you know, just simple things like good design. And it has a huge impact. I mean, Vancouver is a very livable city, as is Seattle and Portland, through very good design. I mean, they put in a link from the airport to downtown, and it's an honor system on fares. You know, there's no toll booths, etc. It's very well run. It's a very interesting city in terms of its public development. I look at just, whenever I go around cities, I'm always looking at the landscaping at the sidewalk level. You know, architects love to give you the drawings with the big green trees, but I say, yeah, but for me, it's the low light. Certainly now we're looking at different, you'll notice in architecture today, the amount of kind of investigation of facades, everything from sun shielding, etc. There's a big revolution. I would say the biggest technology today in architecture is glass. It is unbelievable what's happening with glass today. And then this integration of urban transit. I mean, we've got this huge battle going on in Toronto. Should we build subways, LRT, or keep streetcars?
By glass, you're talking about the use of it or the technology of the manufacturing of glass?
Both.
Or
Not
Okay.
so much the manufacturing, it's the research and the technology, okay? And I'll come back and talk a little about that. Yeah, glass, you know, we use it as a structural element. We use it in interiors. Now, I have a friend who owns a company, Art Glass, and he said the biggest part of his business are the interior partitions that you switch the switch and they go opaque. And so we're beginning to embed stuff in glass. Glass is fantastic. I mean, what's happening? We're now looking at ways that we build solar collection into glass. It's amazing what's happening in the world. And just look at architecture as you go around today. You'll see a lot of more and more glass being used. We have to increase the thermal capacity. But yeah, it's a very interesting field. But I'm just saying that when I look at sustainability, you know, just the technical, putting a green roof on my house, the technical detail that we got into, and the arguments we had with the building trades and the city, they did not understand. They said you have to live by the code. The code said you have to have an airspace between the insulation and the membrane. We said, no. In order to get the guarantee on the spray insulation, it has to go to the underside. And so, just technically, a green roof is a very complex mechanism, and you're worried about a mistake because you don't want to lift all that planting to fix a leak.
Can I
Yeah.
The two pictures on the right, do you mind if I just from like a horticultural perspective share some things that I've been learning in the field? So we started to do rain gardens in DC and also in Maryland suburbs up top, and it goes straight to infrastructure because we see these really great like opportunities to do curb cuts to collect water along the way, and so that's started to work really well. But then if you go down to the picture below, you'll see that there's grass between on the tracks under the railroad or under the train.
Yeah.
A lot of designers like to think what'll work in Germany, what works in Canada also works in the Mid-Atlantic and also works in Florida and Texas. We did, I worked for a contractor that did a pilot program for the new Red Line in Baltimore, and they wanted to put grass between the tracks. It is the dumbest idea possible. Like, it is just so resource intensive to maintain turf in this climate.
My driveway is grass. In my house, I use
The permeable paver stuff.
I use a permeable concrete block.
But in terms of the practicality of doing it on a train track in Baltimore, it's just.
Well, listen, I would agree with you. I think that you will see things in Europe, and you will see things that are just not climate appropriate. But what I do find in our city is rather than try and make it work, the city comes in and puts asphalt down. So we have a median down the middle of the road near my place. They planted it beautifully. They put in irrigation. They never turned on the irrigation. They never came back and looked after the garden. And now they're coming back and putting asphalt on this planting bed because what happens, of course, in capital projects, landscaping is part of that budget, but no one puts a budget for maintaining it. And then the public works people say, well, we can't have all these weeds, we're getting complaints. So as you go around the cities, notice how many areas of planting get filled in, because we've never dealt with the operating side of landscape.
So how would a landscaper get involved into getting into operating in Canada?
Well, it's no different than here, and that is that it's the way you structure your budgets. You know, cities have a budget, and governments often where you write off the cost in year one. You don't carry it as an asset. You know, the whole accounting system is such that they don't account for deferred maintenance in their accounting systems. And if you're going to cut a budget, cut the goddamn flowers. You know, I mean, they're a pain. So that's what happens. Now, you know, you go to cities like Portland and others, and you say, how come they can do it? Political will. Because I do think that if we are going to say to people, it's got to be pleasant to walk, I think we have to be serious about that walk. And as I go around cities, I'm always looking at how they do sidewalks, etc. I mean, you're right. You go to Germany, they have a beautiful bicycle trail, and then they have a walking trail, and they, you know, you can tell that the pedestrian has, you know, they're the king. I'm not saying we're gonna get there, but all I'm pointing out is that if we don't deal with sustainability at the design level of the pedestrian and so forth, you know, it's not about. It's one thing to have the big policy, but it's the capability of designing this level. And of course, you know, I'm always a big believer that landscape architects are an important part of any design team.
Have you seen our NAOP challenge team put together a plan with a divided roadway with a 30-foot median in the middle?
Mhm.
And they were going to then
It's a green corridor.
block it off and have it as an open yard, different times for events. And I wonder if you've seen much in the way of shared pathways between the autos and pedestrians.
Yeah, a great example is the highway that goes from Denver to, what's the ski area? Vail.
Vail?
Okay. Right down the middle of that is a bicycle trail. And it goes for, I don't know, must be 100 miles. Now, not many highways do that, but they built this bicycle trail right down the middle of the median. And it, you know, meanders, beautiful. And I thought, it takes a few bridges here and there, but what a phenomenal idea. And that's been there for 20 years. And so there are I mean, this gets into a whole other debate about bicycles. I mean, a bicycle in Toronto is like, you know, you buy the bike and you buy your coffin. Because what happens is big trucks turn corners. They don't see the bicyclist. The bicyclist assumes they have the right of way, and you know who's going to win that one. Oh, sorry. So, yeah, we have our city is absolutely bike friendly.
See, you know, I've been in, and I can't say where, but I've been in European cities where it looked like a closed road, because there's pedestrians all over it. Yet there were cars going down through it. And they were basically sharing it, but the pedestrians had the right of way.
Oh, there's a great example of this in Vancouver. There's an area called Granville Island. And Granville Island sits under a bridge. It was owned by the federal government, and it was basically a storage yard. And a politician was retiring from, it was like a congressman or senator, and managed to get a sum of money from the federal government. And he came up with an interesting business plan, And they redesigned this whole area and kept the heavy industry. So there's a concrete company and so forth. But it doesn't have any roads. It has right-of-ways, of which when you drive down it, there's no sidewalk, there's no curbs. You just have to be careful that you don't mow someone over. So they coexist in the same right-of-way. It was built 25 years ago, successful from day one. The planners fought it tooth and nail. The lawyers said, oh, we're gonna have legal issues, you have to have a clear curb and et cetera. But there are examples of that, where the car and the pedestrian share the same right-of-way.
That's what you guys were thinking of, right?
No.
No?
No. We were gonna completely close the roads.
Yeah.
Because you can still access the site from all the major roadways,
You're gonna close it for a special event.
but we were gonna close
Yeah.
like the main intersection inside of our site, so then it would be a full pedestrian plaza
For special events.
for special events, yeah.
What about the other 90% of the time?
Then cars can drive through it. We have, what is it, I think 2 drive lanes, or
Yeah.
sometimes 4 drive lanes, bike lanes, parking lanes, and then we have wide 10 to 15-foot sidewalks
Yeah.
along the road with another 30-foot green space and then another 10-foot sidewalk.
But wouldn't it be nice if that could be shared with the pedestrians all the time?
I think culturally, it would never
Yeah.
work in a DC.
But there is a
Culture.
hybrid solution, and we're just in the midst of taking it through the city. And that is that they're going to designate certain roads and close them on Sundays
Yeah.
for people to walk with their family.
Yeah.
And they're also, we have a major expressway into the city. Now they close that once a month for bicycles. And so, you know, you have to find an alter, but I think the idea of actually closing them on a regular basis, because then you get in the habit of saying Sunday morning, let's go for a walk. If you know, and then during the week, you're not gonna go for a walk because you're at work. So there may be more of that sharing that could go on, but it has to be done on a consistent basis.
With programs like this that require, it really requires people to change their lifestyle and their perception.
Yeah.
Do you think the cultural change needs to come first, or sort of if you build it, the culture will change? Like road sharing, I cannot imagine people in DC saying, I'm gonna let 5 pedestrians walk in front of my car. And like with all the like walking paths and things.
Well, I'll deal with it when I show you the example of Stockholm,
Okay.
because they actually overcame the resistance to congestion pricing. This is a site that I've stuck up here. It's an old friend of mine. His name is Ricky Werman, and he founded a thing called TED Talk. Hates it today. He sold it. He got rid of it about 12 years ago. He said it's just a crass commercial enterprise with no quality control. But he has gone ahead. This is his latest endeavor. And it's, I only put it up here because you can look at it yourself, but I think it's fabulous. What you can do is take any city, well, all this, he's still putting the data in, and you can actually have a look at it in a lot of statistical ways. I don't know if it's downloading or what's happening. So I can't pull it up now, I'll pull it up later. It's not working. You know what, we'll pull up. But take note of this site, and you can compare density, you can compare all sorts of statistical data in comparing urban forms. I don't know why it's not coming up, but
Internet protected mode off.
protected mode off, whatever the heck that means.
That's right.
Is that good?
Okay, so we'll come back to it when we take a break. I won't waste your time. Do I just turn, like this one?
Yep. Yeah.
Nope.
Nope.
This one?
Yeah.
It's hard to read from this angle. Okay. So I'll try and get that working. Now, one of the things, again, we get caught up in ideology. And one of the things that people argue is that the compact city is the green city. And, you know, I'm a bit of a, I guess, counterintuitive in the sense that when people believe in something, I'm usually looking the other way. Because there's, we tend to latch on to these, and of course, new urbanism, green city, compact city, walkable city, these are all things that if you went to a planning conference, people would be holding near and dear to their heart. So I found a piece of research on this, and it's published in the Journal of American Planning Association, and it looked at this. Now, it's doing it through modeling, and they wanted to see if this really worked or not, because it's a very transformational shift to say that we're going to actually redesign or reconfigure cities to be walkable or to be new urbanism, etc. And for the common person, they don't even know what the heck that means. So they took 3 English metropolitan areas, and through computer modeling, they imposed 3 different urban forms over the growth of a 30-year period. And they modeled it. One was hyper-dense with tight restrictions. A second was an urban growth boundary and prioritizing urban transit. And then they had sprawl, very few controls. And this is a very quick summary. You'd have to go and read the article. And so they modeled between 2001 and 2031. And what they discovered was there was very slight difference between the 3 urban forms. Now, I'm not defending the research or I'm not criticizing it, but I'm saying unless we begin to do research and understand, we get caught in these policies. And of course, someone one day says, I don't see why we're doing this. So I think this kind of urban research, at least it adds to the debate. So, but the important part here, to our surprise, if you compare the compact form versus current, the difference in reduced transport by automobile is very minor. Only 5% of people really abandoned their car. 95% continued to own a car. And basically, we're not very convinced of the idea that compacting cities will make very much difference in terms of environmental quality. But it will have a severe consequence in terms of economic and social issues. So what he's basically saying is the urban form has much greater impact on economic and social issues than it does on environmental issues. However, what's important about this is that the researchers are saying they'll have a much better chance of reducing negative impact of modern living by focusing on automobile technology and reduced energy use in buildings. That's a much higher priority than reconfiguring our urban growth pattern. Now, I'm not even sure how we reconfigure urban growth. You know, under the old Soviet style, they've done it. The Chinese tried to do it, and no one's ever succeeded. But I thought it was interesting that it's much more effective than compacting or dispersing cities because there's only a 5% difference either way. So they're saying that basically looking at compact versus sprawl, it had some significant social and economic impact, but it didn't have a huge impact on sustainability, whereas they're saying technology offers a much better future than trying to constrain the behavior of the market.
Well, as I say, you don't want to debate, it's a flawed study, it's so flawed.
Have you read the study?
Yeah, I was surprised why it was even published. Because you see, I can understand because it's not a geographer.
I can't,
Let me give you a 30 seconds view of it. I was trained as a geographer. There's what we call spatial patterns, and compact, dispersal, those are called patterns, spatial patterns. And then there's what is called spatial process, which is all of the interactions that produce those patterns. And usually, what causes different patterns to emerge, right, embedded in spatial processes. Well, it's using patterns as a causal representation of the processes. That is just conceptually flawed. I mean, it's taking the conditional, the reverse side. So I was not surprised.
I can't defend their position or your position.
Yeah.
All I'm pointing out is that there are people beginning to ask questions, and if the research is flawed, I'd rather they fix it and continue to research.
But does it make sense to you that, I mean, what is even this, the conclusions is totally counterfactual to tell us that somehow if you, because if compact works, right, that should be
Well,
reduced.
it's probably a debate better held in front of
Yeah,
other
okay.
people, and that, you know, and then we get a chance to look at it. I mean, I'm not denying your assessment. I'm just saying that I can't really.
I mean, because all you said is land use is not what is driving how cities work, that what drives is technology. And all the, all the other people, I mean, all the other research shows that that's the opposite.
Okay.
That land use is the key to understanding how
Okay.
cities work, not technology. Technology may enhance it.
You're an urban economist.
I'm an urban economist, yes. So it's an environmental.
No, listen,
I know him.
I don't
He's a
wanna-
modeler. He's a modeler.
Yeah.
He's a very much.
No, I'm not defending it. I'm
Yes.
just saying that they came to a set of conclusions, and as you know, in a lot of research, you know, I mean, there's a fellow in Toronto called Richard Florida, and his research is flawed, but he manages to sell books.
And he made a lot of money,
He made a lot of money. His research is flawed, but his message seems to get through despite it.
Yeah, and he started a great conversation. Now, I think Richard Florida is a terrific spokesperson to look at our urban phenomenon. And you're right, his research is flawed and simplistic, but he started maintaining a great conversation.
And maybe as flawed as his research is, people say it's flawed. And then you say, well, what do you mean? And then, you know, different disciplines come in, but at least I'm not willing, I guess I'm just saying I'm a bit counterintuitive. When people say something works, I want to see if someone else is saying it may not work. But, you know, another one right now, I am a believer in mixed use. It's a hell of a challenge for real estate people. Because as you know, when you stack uses, you get different structural systems, you get transfer beams, and you get different rates of absorption. So you may have a strong condo market and a weak office market and a so-so retail. And so mixed use is very challenging. We actually only have, we don't have any, well, we don't really have, in Toronto, as vibrant as our construction industry, we don't have that many mixed use developers. And we have a very good retail developer and a very good office developer, and they're going to go together and sort of form a joint venture because of tackling this issue. Mixed use is really hard to do. But I think that, again, cities are saying, well, we've got to bring uses closer together. So I'm not opposed to it, but I'm just saying it's a real challenge to solve this.
I think your point's well made, though, that with mixed-use developments, you're almost guaranteed that some part of it won't be successful. You know, you're never gonna hit a home run with a mixed-use development. And
they depreciate functionally at different rates. So I've gone back to look at some, and the condos look fine, the retail looks tired, and the office needs redone. How do you do it? You know, because they're.
How do you do it?
Pardon?
What do you mean, how do you do it?
Redo it.
You just do it.
No. Oh, no, the prime example I can give you is they had to jackhammer out a lot of the work on the office. The people in the condos said, no way. The noise? So, yeah, it takes a lot of work to redevelop a mixed-use building.
Can you have them, instead of doing it mixed vertically, in most cities, you could.
Do it horizontally.
Do it horizontally. So each person has their own building, but you have the shopping center next to that office building.
Yeah.
And then it's a separate business and you.
I mean, we do it with strata type now, and I was indicating, we have a very large mixed use that just went up. 650 condo units, 400,000 square feet of office, and 200 of retail. One of the tenants being Whole Foods. The project was close to failure. Everything was sold out by the 400,000 square feet of office space. They tried everything, and the best they could get was a government agency, and they didn't want this agency. They didn't feel that was solving the problem. Well, they hit a home run. What they discovered was, I talked to some people yesterday about it, they discovered that the Korean and the Iranian population will not rent office space under any circumstance. They have to buy it. They condoed the thing, 10,000 square foot units, and they sold it in 30 days at $600 a square foot. Economic, it didn't make sense. It was a cultural issue. And they discovered this by a little building up the street, and they were noticing that, you know, Chinese, Korean, Iranian were buying these little condos. It didn't make sense. So anyway, they sold it out, made a fortune. But they were struggling. They couldn't get their construction loan in place until they had a tenant in place. And meanwhile, they had agreements for the condo with occupancy dates. And they were beginning, and they had Whole Foods, and they were beginning to sweat it out because they couldn't get a tenant for the office space.
So are these town centers mixed use development? Those are mixed use, they're doing pretty well.
Well,
Like Bethesda or?
we have mixed use, and what I call what Mike was talking about, mixed up uses.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, mixed up.
That's
Vertical mixed use.
That's
And-
better.
Vertical versus horizontal.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
what a city is, it's a variety of.
We built a town
Next year.
center on 11.5 acres, and it was 125,000 feet office buildings, 250,000, 300 condos, and 80,000 feet of retail. And it was a outrageous economic success. It was a disaster in terms of, as a mixed-use project, how not to do it. And we had conflict between the condos, between the office, and then they put the retail down there, and they put the Starbucks where the exit from the garage was. Nobody could get out in the morning because people were getting their Starbucks, you know, and it was just, and it fit on 11.5 acres. And I love this project. We made a lot of money with it, of course, but we can do better. But I thought we could take that as a product type. And you think of all these retail centers, the kind of the abandoned retail centers all over, like, what do you do with this now? They're mattress discounters or whatever, you know. And they're about 10, 11 acres, you know, and with great access, or transportation access. And then the Great Recession hit, and we kind of lost interest in big mixed-use projects. But I think there's so much.
I think they're coming back.
Well, there's so much work to be done about thinking through it, you know.
Yeah.
And I swear to God, the heart of the mixed-use project is all based on parking and access. You know, I mean, you got to figure out the parking way, you got to figure out the transportation systems, and then the uses then can live together.
Yeah.
We have state laws that says if you sell a condo, you've got to have a parking place.
The other thing that's pushing it in our city is the big boxes all want downtown. And so now you've got a tenant willing to take 40 to 200,000 square feet. The problem is, you know, we have Home Depot wanting in, we've got all these retailers wanting downtown, and the local community sees them as a kind of suburban with all this parking. So, but I again, without any real substance behind my comment, I'm just saying I think that mixed use will continue to be looked upon as a way of bringing uses closer.
And we'll figure it out. I think we just need to stay with it a little bit, and we can't. There's so much good things that can happen, but there's a lot of work to do. And just from the business side, from the development side of how to put these uses together, and thinking through it, because we've learned so much. But we also get, you know, our two-story, our urban models of retail, and we're seeing, you know, Harris Teeter's, we have two-story grocery stores, and we're seeing, you know, Walmart's having an urban model, so to speak. I think we'll see a lot more of that stuff.
Yeah.
With virtually no parking ratios, and delivered by UPS the next morning, you know.
Exactly. I always stick this in because it's kind of interesting. You probably know that a Columbia professor has published a book on urban farming, high-rise. I don't know what the solution is, but again, I think people will continue to look into this area. Probably it's highly unfeasible at this stage, but certainly there are there's a growing interest in urban farming, whatever that title means. So I'm just putting it into the mix of things that are worth.
I agree with you on that urban farming.
Pardon?
I think it's just fascinating. Yeah, and it has so much potential.
Yeah.
And I think that the feasibility, the economic feasibility is close.
Yeah.
And,
But you know, again, we amended our city bylaw to allow you to have one chicken in your single family house, as long as it's not a rooster. But you know, my wife's parents said, so what's the big deal? So-and-so has a chicken, and so these Italian families have a chicken for eggs. They said, how else are you gonna get eggs? So, you know, Vancouver's done the same, and we're seeing this whole debate upon, you know, what are you allowed to have in your single family home? So now you're allowed a chicken, and you're allowed some rabbits too. But thank God for immigrants, you know. They bring some sort of realism to this debate. The point is that the building fabric and the central systems represent about half the total value pool when you look at buildings. And so this is where we're going to see the thrust of the technology. I mentioned yesterday even the difference between a curtain wall and a glass wall. More and more of our condos now are moving to a curtain wall system versus glass wall. And do people know the difference between a curtain
You
wall?
were going to explain it, I think.
A curtain wall is a pre-assembled membrane that goes on the outside, and it usually stands. It can actually be somewhat detached from the building. Then it becomes what we call a rain screen principle. And so if there's any leakage, the water can run down the back of it. There's an airspace so that you don't get any pressure shifts. A glass wall is where they pour the slab and then they put the panel between the slabs. The problem with it is that you've got thermal, you've got a thermal break in that the edge of that slab is sticking out. And it means that over a 10-year period, the chances of that membrane beginning to leak are pretty high. So Bill, now what happened was curtain wall used to be twice as much as, but we can bring it in from China at a price now that's almost comparable. So the price has come down by 50% in the last 3 or 4 years.
So you're saying, if I understand correctly, a curtain wall is somehow different than a panel wall.
Yeah.
So we have the precast concrete panels.
Yeah.
Are those is that a curtain wall?
No, that's called a rain screen wall.
It's a rain screen wall.
Yeah, I'd have to get a drawing here to show you the difference between them.
When you use the term building fabrics, what does that mean?
Just the enclosure on the outside, how you're enclosing the building.
The curtain wall, the roof.
Yeah, and of course you get into the issue of R value. If you look at ASHRAE standard, you're not supposed to have more than 40% glass. So they now put in glass spandrel panels. The R value is very low. A single sheet of glass, R value is 2. Triple glazing, we have triple glazing in our house, we're up to R12 for that. So, and then there's issues of radiation and so forth. But so there's a lot more technology coming in, looking at these different systems. And then of course the other one is the central systems themselves, all the support systems, the plumbing, the heating, the air conditioning, the ventilation. So this is based on average of Germany, Italy, Sweden, the United Kingdom. It's very hard to get a lot of this data for North America. And the biggest, if you look at we'll come back and talk about the clean tech. These are firms involved in that. You'll find that lighting has been the most, has seen the most activity, especially with the conversion to LEDs, taking out fluorescent fixtures. So you can see the growth sectors. You know, efficient electronics has, home energy management is growing, but lighting is by far the one sector that's had the most interest for industry. That's changed. I mean, you probably got the same issue here. We now don't, you can't buy normal light bulbs anymore. Government has banned the selling of a normal light bulb, so you have to go to LED. But the LEDs in the last 3 years, and they burn 10% the energy. Solar has not done well. You can again see. I think it's the out of the 100 firms in the clean tech group, I think this is representing the number of firms in this particular sector. And so, as you know, solar has not panned out very well. A lot of people jumped in on it, and as the government withdrew the subsidies, and the technology still has a long way to go, but you can see there's the fastest growing area, the downstream services. And then if you look at the development stages, you'll see that the blue, we'll take a break right after this one, sort of in the pre-commercial, the orange, wide commercial availability, and the line, the green line is coming. So you can see that advanced material, almost still in the pre-commercial stage, conventional fuels, fuel cell, hydrogen. It's only when you get up here that you begin to see that there has been commercial availability, transportation, waste management, smart grids, energy efficiency, air, solar, and now, you know, agriculture. You probably have the same certified wood system here. Is it CFS? I always get the initial wrong. Certified forest product.
Yeah. CFP, is it, or CFS?
It's become almost standard now.
It's a stamp you get on your wood.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think CFS. So you can begin to see that even in this small chart, that and I'll show. I'm going to come back to this. We've actually seen a falling off of firms in these sectors, and I'll just show you the clean tech index. It dropped dramatically. So we're in very early cycle in many of these organizations today. So the good news is there's lots of opportunity. Okay, we'll take a break here. Good.
I'm so very cool. You felt that? Yeah.
What makes that efficient is that you have exposed slabs. And so
According to
So,
I cannot go walking by myself. Like,
so he can move quickly through concrete that has a really high thermal mass. So it's difficult to change its temperature. And it also has it has a high conductivity.
So you lose heat there.
Yes.
And the other one, and that's the curtain.
And then the curtain wall is designed to be Hopkins property.
I think that
If it's an actual.
no.
It's
You know, the famous article by Melvin Webb, Community of
It should be like a normal sidewalk.
And what he argued back in, the book is called Urban Forum. And back in the 60s, he argued
In the morning, I don't
technology
feel all that stuff,
would
but-
become a new medium
but
of
like-
education and it would redefine labor.
Yeah, I was trying to show
Well,
that.
see,
And you know what happened? The telephone drove people closer together, not further.
You see, but see, what I'm saying is that it's like a kung fu site.
And nobody
See,
uses it,
you
it's
remember,
like
you know, I understand.
terrified of like
You
getting
know,
snatched, and
you
like
know,
lots of people are there all the time.
So,
But then there's a
But
lot of
that
guys
was-
watching tonight that
they
people
were saying
fucking.
that was dead of business, they were saying, okay, when the
Yeah.
time comes, whenever.
Yeah, I know that.
And then they say, it's just not now enough for like internet to do.
From the city up into
And
Tassau.
everything will be
And,
virtual.
Steve,
What I should
And I'm like, people don't use my gear.
You know, but let me tell you this, you know why young people in
Well,
our city are really
so-
I was on a walking trail. Yep.
It's basically a walking trail.
The designers
I know, that's my question.
If it wasn't happening there, it's
Should
gonna
we
happen
add
somewhere
the
else.
walking trails and then expect people to modify their perception behavior, or do we need to
Same thing
modify
here.
their perception?
But the difference is here you have exposed, unengineered material that doesn't have good insulation properties. And here it's concealed by the engineered property, or by the engineered material. So
How, who
It's-
needs to be face to face?
Okay.
And then processing control, interactivity. So they now have that virtual experience. It's so real. It's actually privileged to, I mean, they're not expecting to
you
have
could,
some
but this doesn't have
experience.
flash.
That's what it is.
last night.
Okay, but it's not.
It was interesting.
So this will still be better.
Like they were,
So
like one of my buddies,
adding that,
we talked about the,
you know,
the trolley like on H.
like you
And
could
one of my buddies was
put some spray foam on the edge of the slab and like stick something like in front of it.
I don't know how much it costs.
And it would definitely help.
Is like transferring a couple
No, I'm just saying, I mean, I'm saying
Better.
I'm just trying, so that piece of glass is really like two panes.
I can see that side.
Yeah.
My other buddy was like, yeah, but like,
Everything have.
like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
want to ride it.
Glass.
Right, it's not like, it's a
Yeah.
different form, but it attracts different people.
Yeah, and then
And
you can fill the
I can
space
also
with
see that
argon
part. So
or
there's
something
like
like
very
that, which
good
is
arguments for both sides. And then I
big
was like,
molecules that
the
are.
other part is that I don't think we're
Well,
just looking at it as a
Well, yeah, well,
transfer.
you're
Just
coming out of
cars,
conceptual,
like,
right?
Yeah.
Well, I thought I know,
This.
you know, and I was a curtain wall
There,
the outside.
this is the values, which then we can build out.
So I think that you, like, our industry has very few like standards really. So I think that what you might be calling a wall, what he might be calling
Right.
a wall are very different.
I think it would just be to redesign.
And so I think that, you can call the curtain wall just the skin of the
So like you
building,
can hop on both sides.
or you can make it something more specific, and I think what he
And
meant.
on both sides of the bus, rather than having like,
Well, I like the
I
idea.
don't feel like San Francisco trolley, but like,
Glass,
and then
that-
jump on top, like, it's open air.
It's a ceiling with that.
I mean, not like.
You have a glass curtain wall.
But you know, like our.
My wife
buses
is the
are,
other
like,
end,
not
she says
set
the
up
quality of
for-
her life is the fact she doesn't read newspapers, she doesn't watch the news.
Like we have an awkward
And she
scene
doesn't
of cold,
do
and
like
then like not, and then it's like.
That's her quality of life. She said, you know, but, you know, we travel the cities, we walk, she's here.
I think it's just, I
An
think it's
art
art
gallery now, so she's not a
Seal
believer
everything, you know.
in that other side.
Which is where
They're not.
Yeah,
That's
I'm just gonna go to the washroom.
It should, the only difference should be that they have a right of way, whereas a bus is in the
Water
same
breathing
right of way as a
membrane,
car.
will try to carry it
Like a
that
trolley
way,
should-
and that's gonna leak.
Like in
I mean,
Boston, like.
At the end of the day,
trolleys
there are
go down.
damaged structures, so something's gonna leak.
Rather than put it in the rail.
That's happening.
You can't
So,
pull Mother
uh,
New York, they have bus lanes,
But,
but I don't think it really helps the process.
like, I think older technology was you would pour your two slabs, right, and then you would try to assemble
Oh, everything your
a brick
ID.
wall between them
No.
on
They're not gonna let you
site.
back in.
Or worse yet, you would,
Well, or you
That's
hang
in
it.
this building.
yeah.
You hang angle irons and you can build, you can make it think about it.
I'm so
Or with a precast,
My nose is cold.
welding them plate to plate. You know,
Right.
Precast comes with a welding plate, you know, has a welding plate on it, you know. And,
And the good thing about that is, with the precast, you're designing them off-site to higher standards than just having, you know, a bunch of guys, you know, double buttering it and putting it
well,
on.
yeah, and, you know, we did that building, with offsite precast with half bricks. It was great. Quality control, you know, whole thing. done one again. We're not ever doing that because it was so expensive for them. And it's, you know, they lost their shirt on. They thought they could do it. And we also had those brick designs. We had a whole, I think we had 15 different panels come on site in the right order. And, you know, it was like three-dimensional chess. And, because you got to bring it when they go up, not the day before, a day later. And, so that, but I think we'll see so much, especially as we have the supply of masons are decreasing. And all of our crafts, or trade, so to speak, we're having a manpower shortage. Put them off site, I think we get better at all their control, and you can really less, you need a master mason or a master electrician.
Right, or you need one.
One, that's right, that's right. Now, it'll be interesting to see where our immigration policies go, because we've been immigrating all of our masons and concrete workers.
Why?
It is.
They
told me that every day they want to argue and debate everything, and they needed a bill for that. That's the common creativity in schools.
I don't know. We could call the
They're like,
engineers
"Can
and
you
tell them
find
that it's a
drugs
nice
in
box in here.
It's set on 8.
Drug this girl.
Yeah.
She has an opinion.
Yeah, there you. Alright, it is racing.
It is. I
I
think we
don't
should
like
go
them.
outside and learn about sustainable cities in the grass.
It'd be quieter out there too.
Yeah, it's just there for a fake placebo.
Yeah. I'm glad I dressed it at home.